He picked up his house phone receiver and heard the annoying sound that alerted him that he had messages. He dialed his code and the digital voice announced one message. He tilted the bottle to his lips and let a hefty sip of brew slide down his throat as the first call played. "Hey, sonny boy. My birthday and you couldn't be bothered to lift the goddamn phone?" A gritty, drunken chuckle followed. "If it weren't for me, you wouldn't even be on this planet, so give the old man a call. Better yet, stop by. I'm dying of thirst." The smooth taste turned sour in his mouth, and he headed for the kitchen to pour the nearly full bottle down the drain. The old man might claim all Mannings were alike, and Kevin might have proven him right only 2 short months ago, but he'd be damned if he'd willingly take another step toward hell. On the way home, he'd stopped by the seedy apartment where he'd grown up, drawn in by the continuing sense of obligation he lived with on a daily basis. Peering through the window, he'd seen his father passed out on the couch, bottle of scotch in hand. Visiting would have been useless, and Kevin had given up trying to reform him years ago. He'd only gotten smacked around for his trouble. Instead, he kept tabs on the old man and made sure he had a roof over his head. Not that his father appreciated the gesture. A persistent ring brought him out of the past, and he glanced at the caller ID on the receiver. Whether the voicemail picked up the call or he did, Kevin would have to deal with his so-called father. Might as well get it over with. An hour later, he walked toward a nearby bar, wishing he'd let the voicemail screen his calls. Even dealing with the old man would be preferable to this. He'd only been back in town for a couple of weeks, and he'd planned on dealing with his recent past, but on his own terms, when he was ready to face the casualties his actions had caused. Kevin pulled open the door with the word STARS etched into the fogged glass. He had no business being in a place like this, but he hadn't chosen the location any more than he'd wanted the meeting. He entered the upscale establishment and grabbed a seat by the bar. A club with fancy-themed drinks and wall-to-wall suits wasn't the place he'd pick to spend his downtime, but he had to admit that it beat the empty place he now called home. He ordered a club soda from the bartender, kicked back and took in his surroundings. From his cushioned stool, he had a perfect view of the front door and, thanks to the mirrored walls around him, a sweeping angle of the back 20 tables which had yet to be filled. A seductive-looking waitress with dark hair and a bottle of cleaning fluid made her way between the tables, pausing only to spray and wipe before moving on to the next target. Kevin watched her, appreciating the soft sway of her hips as she moved to the beat of the music. She leaned over the glass tabletops, giving him an enticing view of a firm ass enclosed in tight denim and long legs covered by black cowboy boots. As she headed for the next table, she paused, glancing back toward the bar and its growing number of customers before swinging around once more. Kevin choked on a gulp of club soda. In the brief second during which he caught a glimpse of her face, the sexy waitress had reminded him of Nikki. He hadn't thought of her in a while, hadn't allowed himself the pain, or the pleasure, except in his dreams, where control deserted him and desire took over. In his more rational waking moments, he knew the night couldn't have been as good as he remembered. And even if it was, 2 months had passed, enough time to put the thought of her behind him. And he had. He wouldn't be thinking of her now if Tony's widow hadn't called and asked to meet him. Kevin focused on the waitress as she polished the brass railings above the booths. Small waist, just narrow enough for his fingers to span, and impossibly long legs. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Yeah, she resembled Nikki, all right. He and Tony had been partners for 8 years, and